Today's first lesson is Job chapter 23, verses 1 through 9 and 16 through 17, found on pages 471 through 472. Then Job answered, "Today also my complaint is bitter. His hand is heavy despite my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come even to his dwelling. I would lay my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn what he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Would he contend with me in the greatness of his power? No, but he would give heed to me. There an upright person could reason with him, and I should be acquitted forever by my judge. If I go forward, he is not there, or backward, I cannot perceive him. On the left he hides, and I cannot behold him. I turn to the right, but I cannot see him. God has made my heart faint. The Almighty has terrified me. If only I could vanish in darkness, and thick darkness would cover my face." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Today, my complaint is bitter. If only I could vanish. If only thick darkness would cover my face. These are troubling words. They seem to be somehow out of place. Yet there is something that is familiar about them. And that something is despair. Despair. Oh, despair. Your presence is a constant in these days. You are carried upon our shoulders, our back bent beneath your weight. How we long for your heavy presence to go away. And yet, when we wake, you are still there, found around every corner, haunting the edges of our days and torturing the boundaries of our nights. Each of us feel your weight differently, but we feel you there. Our headlines constantly remind us of your presence, the lingering shadow of a pandemic, the sound of war and saber rattling, the ever-present effects of systemic oppression, division in our neighborhoods and in our homes, hatred of those we fail to understand, our tainted history, our uncertain future, racism, injustice, violence, death, loss, diagnoses, disease, uncertainty, the unknown, despair. There is so much to carry. It feels like an unraveling, a coming apart. And it feels antithetical to faith to admit that we are troubled by you. Yet we only lie to ourselves if we pretend as if you aren't there. A painted-on smile, a saccharine over-spiritualized response, only hide your presence from us for a brief moment. And when they fade, you are there. Perhaps the faithful thing to do is to give you a name, to discover where you are located, where you occupy space in our bodies, where you take up residence in our minds. Perhaps the faithful thing to do is to follow the example of the poets and the psalmist and name the places where you dwell, despair. There are those who would tell us that our faith is lacking because of these feelings of despair. that somehow we aren't doing faith quite right. That faith and despair are binaries that cannot exist together. But what they may not know and may never come to understand is that our faith could not be any deeper or tangibly real for being willing to feel this despair, to name where it resides, is itself faith. If we listen to the words of the poet, we find despair tumbling from the quivering lips of Job, pouring out from the pen of the psalmist. The profound and prophetic words seem to proclaim that the naming of despair is an act of faith, not its antithesis. This raw honesty is a part of the journey. Faith doesn't ask us to never feel despair. Faith compels us to continue moving, to continue on living in the midst of its presence. Our experience reminds us that despair is there. Our faith becomes more tangible when lived in its midst. Yes, despair is present, but it isn't all there is. Absence. Why have we been forsaken, abandoned, forgotten? Why did we forget? Why do you trouble yourself, my soul? Why are you so restless in me? We wait, cry by day with no answer, no rest. All this waiting feels empty, like a long, desperate stare into what seems like nothingness, searching for someone, anyone who might transform the place in which we find ourselves. Echoing through this stale, heavy air, we hear the psalmist's voice shout, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me?" And the voice is familiar, for it simultaneously comes from without and from within. Yes, we are no strangers to these words. Like the poet, the author, the psalmist, sometimes this crying out for God feels like nothing more than trying to outshout mighty winds. Or perhaps it's a whisper of resignation into the gentle breeze. We pour ourselves out like water. Where are you? In the face of such trying times, in these moments of despair, we may indeed find ourselves often wondering, where are you, God? Like despair, perhaps understanding our longing, our haunting questions of absence as the opposite of faith is actually a falsehood, an untrue binary, an unnecessary either or that does nothing but lead us to personal shame. What if instead we could see this query as faith in its raw honesty? For isn't there more to the inquiry than questioning the existence of God? Isn't this line of questioning more about the manner in which we understand the divine? Perhaps the faithful thing to do is to again follow the example of the poet, the psalmist, and name the places and the moments when we experience the absence. Maybe, just maybe, this will lead us into an exploration of how we perceive the divine, an examination of who this God is in whom we say we believe, a questioning of how we understand God to be at work in the world, in our lives. And perhaps we will discover along the way that what we are missing isn't the divine at all. Perhaps what we are missing is the God we fashioned, the divine we conceived and convinced ourselves that we wanted and somehow even needed or deserved. And then we found it all lacking. But if we follow the psalmist's lead, we will find that the fact that we cry out in despair and in the face of felt absence is an act of faith. And if we learn to quiet the noise, if we listen deeper than the anxiety-filled shouts found on the surface, if we lean in and hush our own internal murmurings, the thundering cataracts and the billowing waves, if we follow the lead of the poet and the psalmist and admit the absence we feel, listening as deep calls out to deep, we will hear the whisper of assurance that even in the felt absence, there is something more. Our experience reminds us absence is real. The felt absence is there, but it isn't all that there is. Hope. How long, O God, will my prayers be in vain? Underneath it all, deeper than the depths of our despair, beyond the felt absence and questions of the divine presence, lies something else. It is metronomic, a constant rhythm, a mostly unnoticed beat that compels us, draws us, pulls us ever forward towards something more, towards something different. We can hear it, feel it, in the beauty and the anguish of the words of the poet and the psalmist, in their naked honesty and their raw humanity. We discover solidarity with everyone else. And in those words, we meet our very selves. They call us back to consider our own lives, to the beauty of the mundane, the joy, the pain of our daily existence. In these words, we see ourselves reflected back to us. In them, we discover our own voice reverberating throughout time. We may want to look away, to hide our eyes from their painful and brutal honesty. But there, right there in these words, we are reminded that we have never really ever been alone. Through the poetic retelling of their own experience, the psalmist and the poet give us gentle yet bold reminders of the presence of the divine in the midst. These words are a prophetic proclamation of God's steadfast love, which has never abandoned us, but has been and will continue to be persistently present all along, with us in our very real moments of despair and our tangible experiences of felt absence. In these words, we are called to remember that God did not hide their face from us, but heard our voices when we cried out. This, my friends, is hope. It's not manufactured, wishful thinking. No, this hope is real. This hope accompanies us into the depth of our despair, into the intensity of our feelings of absence, and in the midst of all of the confusing, confounding in-betweens. Hope is found here in the brutal honesty of our humanity, where we become fully human, and God is discovered as the divine who sustains us through everything. This is right where we experience wholeness. Hope. Hope is found all around us in the mystery of the ordinariness of every day. Hope is the daisy that grows in the cracks of the sidewalk. Hope is the scent of the changing seasons. Hope is laughter on the front porch swing. Hope is the deer longing for flowing streams, confident that one day they will return. Hope is a song sung from the depths of despair. Hope is the defiant voice that quivers when it boldly says, "No more." Hope is the poet who writes anyway. Hope is gathering again after missing one another for so long. Hope is the slow, steady, weaving together when it feels like all is coming apart. Hope is resilience in light of and in spite of circumstance. Hope is memory in the presence of absence. Hope is the Spirit interceding when we do not know how to pray. Hope is where steadfast love and mercy kiss. Hope is the nuance of the in-between. Hope is life in the midst. Hope is the name we give to the divine who is always there, no matter where there may be. Hope is the name of the God who can handle our whole selves, our brutally honest despair, as well as our grief over felt divine absence. Hope is found in the God who is ever faithful, in our moments of incongruity and seeming contradiction. Hope is a God who meets us here. This is hope. Hope always is what holds us all together.